Let's talk a little bit about what Mississippi State has done to this point in the season. And we want to grade them so far. So, look, State is 4-2 on the year, 0-2 in the SEC. Now, they've already doubled their win total from a year ago. They've got 3 blowout wins over lesser teams, which is not something that could have been said last season. And they've got the high-profile win in the non-conference against Arizona State. Thrilling win at home, an upset victory, get the crazy touchdown at the end. And you kind of put yourself on the map with that win. And it's a win that set up the rest of the season as being one where you could potentially take a big enough step forward that you're talking about going to a bowl game in year 2 for Jeff Levy, which I think would be a major success for this program and where things have been the last few years, finding bowl eligibility, especially when you consider the schedule, but also with the circumstances the program has been experiencing. That would be huge for this team. And beating Arizona State gave you the opportunity to make bowl eligibility a realistic goal the rest of the way, and that goal still very much in play. So you've already doubled your win total. You've got a high-profile win. You've been competitive with a Tennessee team that is top 15 in the country. Looks like it could be a player within the SEC. I know they've got the loss to Georgia, but I think they could still contend within the conference with the way they've performed at this point, where, that game goes to overtime. You easily could have gotten a win there and moved to 5-0. Clearly, this team is much, much, much better. Now, the flip side is you're 0-2 in the SEC, coming off a really rough loss. You've started to see those injuries pile up a little bit. You're now up to a 14-game SEC losing streak, which I was corrected. That is not the longest in school history. I was going off of Hail State Muse. Blame him. I saw him put out the tweet, and that's what I went with. But no, I guess it's been much longer at one point in school history. Doesn't matter. It's a rough stretch for Bulldog football right now when you talk about 14 straight losses in conference play. When is that going to end? Are you going to be able to find those wins the rest of the way? I think most of us are confident they'll get one somewhere, but can you get 2? Which you need to get bowl eligible. Can you find more than 2? And then you start talking about having a really good year. Clearly, if the team that started 4-0 and went toe-to-toe with Tennessee is still there, that's a team that could win more than 6 games potentially, even with a very difficult stretch. But the difficult stretch is the other part of this that you have to factor in. It's an incredibly difficult schedule the rest of the way. We'll talk about the rest of the way here in a sec, but how do we evaluate this team so far? And we'll start unit by unit. And looking at the offense, how would I grade the offense? We're going to go on an F through an A+ scale. And how would you grade them? I would say overall, I give the offense a B- to this point. And I think if you ask a lot of fans right now, they're probably even going lower than that. They're probably saying something like a C or a D because of some of the frustrations. But I do think there's important context. This is a team that's averaging almost 34 points a game. They are averaging right now under 400 yards a game. That is, it has fallen off a little bit, just under 400, 395.5 yards per game to this point. So that has dropped off here considerably. But this is an offense that you scored 30-plus in 2 of the games you absolutely should have. You had 24 against Arizona State, which I know is not a lot, but Arizona State's a pretty good defense, and you get the win. You scored 34 points against Tennessee. And yes, you got set up with a few short fields, but 34 points against a very good Tennessee team and a solid Tennessee defense. I know they're not great, but a solid Tennessee defense still is impressive. The Texas A&M game is rough, but I also consider the injuries that you had suffered, and you're on the road, bad matchup, talented opponent with all the injuries in place. It was an ugly offensive game. There's no ignoring it, but I also don't think that is representative of who this Mississippi State team is at their fullest. Now, if we get to the end of the year and the health is still a factor the rest of the way when it comes to the offensive line, and that never gels, never improves, well, then you're starting to grade things a little bit differently. And you still consider, okay, you got killed with injuries, which can you prevent that? That's tough. But if that's who the team is, you do have to start to factor it in. So far, we're not fully to that point yet. So I'm going to take it more of that game being a bit of an outlier. A lot of tough circumstances there. Now, can you sit here and say that it's an A performance for the offense at this point? No. Look, they've not played a complete game offensively to this point of the season. You played a poor first half at Southern Miss. played a poor second half against Arizona State, poor first half against Northern Illinois. Alcorn State, kind of, you ignore it. The Tennessee game, that one is honestly one of the more complete offensive showings because you had some production in both the first and second half of that game. I think it was 17 points in both halves of football, but obviously a very up and down game with how you performed over the course of it. And as I did mention, a lot of your touchdowns were off of short fields in that game. You didn't go on a lot of long sustained drives against Tennessee. So you definitely can't sit here and say it's been, A-level offense for Mississippi State. You do dock them a little bit. And I think that's where you dock them to a B, right? From going from an A to a B is like, we've not gotten a complete performance. The fact they're averaging less than 400 yards per game at this point, that's certainly not ideal. You take another bit of a hit there. But also I would say the struggles they've had, pass protection, the struggles they've had from a pass game standpoint as a whole, those are a bit concerning. And I did have such high expectations for this group that it does dock me a little bit. It's a Jeff Lebby team, right? And you felt like year 2, Jeff Lebby, they were going to take a significant step forward offensively. They've not been able to do that just yet. They are better than they were a season ago. No doubt about it. They are a better offense than they were a year ago. In fact, I would go as far to say they are much better. They're still not to where you would want them to be. And again, injuries have played a little bit of a role in that, but obviously Blake Shapen has not fully played as good as you would like him to so far. I think you need to find a little bit more consistency in the receiving core as well. I do think you've got clearly some very good players there, but do you have those guys that could be the consistent, reliable targets when you have to get a conversion? That's one of the things that's kind of lacking to this point. So there are certainly things that they've got to get better at moving forward. But I still think it's a B minus offense. I don't think it's a bad group so far. Digging a little bit further into the offense, biggest positive to this point, I would say skill talent, top to bottom. And Fluff Bothwell leads the way there in the season that he's had. But I know I just said you're still looking for some receivers to emerge as consistent guys. That said, Brennan Thompson and Anthony Evans have overall been very good for Mississippi State to this point. And with what they lost in the receiving core a season ago, again, you're still trying to find that guy that when it's 3rd and 10, who do I trust is going to get open over the middle of the field and provide a conversion? That's the next step, right? But in terms of having guys that are dynamic playmakers, that are real threats against SEC defenses, those two apply. And you've got the talent in the backfield. You found talent at receiver. That's your biggest positive. Biggest negative offensively, it's been offensive line. That group has just not been as good as you would like it to. You were hoping for a bigger step forward. I do think it's fair to say that unit was always going to take time to gel when you consider where they were at a season ago, all the new pieces that were stepping in. And then look, they've been banged up as well. The injuries play a big role in why that group has not been as dominant as you would like. But I would say, though, you were expecting for better, right? You would like more consistent play from the O-line, and we'll see if as they can get healthier, as they get more experience together, can that improve? Biggest question for the offense right now, it's Blake Shapen. Shapen, as I've said repeatedly, is he the problem for the Mississippi State offense? No. Does State need to bench him? No. I think they have to do a better job of helping him out in all facets. But he's not taken a major step forward the way you would like to see. There has been some inconsistencies in his game. There have been, some of the sack avoidance stuff, which is not all on him, but there's times he's got to be a little bit better with that. You want to see more from a 6-year quarterback and ideally being able to elevate the team more than what you've seen so far. Can he continue to take a step forward over the back half of the year? Does he get more settled in as the season goes along? That's another question for that group. Defensively, I'm just going to sit here. Mississippi State, I'm giving him an A when you talk about the Bulldog defense. And some of this grading is absolutely on a curve. It is relative to expectations. Part of why I would not just go B for the offense and actually go B minus is because I had such high expectations for that group. Defensively, it's probably been a B unit overall for college football this season as a whole, but I'm giving them an A because of the expectations, because there were not high expectations for that group. I thought defensively they were still going to struggle mightily, and you can say that you look at the last couple games, they've given up a lot more yards, they've given up a lot more points, and it's like, oh, once SEC play hits, that's really going to start to spiral more and more. It's possible. I don't think we're going to look up and at the end of the year, they're still allowing less than 20 points a game, and that they're still allowing only 335 yards a game. which those numbers are fantastic for this group to this point. Of course, those numbers are going to continue to go up. But the fact that they've absolutely handled their business in the games against the teams they should, which I thought was a big judging point for this team to start the season, is, okay, when you face Southern Miss, face Northern Illinois, do you look like an SEC defense going up against a G5 offense? They did. Gave up a few big plays, gave a few scores. You gave up effectively 10-ish points to Southern Miss. I know they scored 17, but altogether it's like 10 to 14, I guess, of a realistic scores to that team. You gave up 10 to Northern Illinois. Shut out Alcorn. It's Alcorn, but still. Arizona State is a good offense. They're not an incredible offense, but they're a good offense with a lot of talent. You hold them to 20 points. Yes, the second half was not pretty. You still made a huge goal line stand when it mattered, and you shut them down in the first half. Tennessee gave up 20 points to Tennessee in regulation. That's really good. 20 points in regulation to the Tennessee offense when Tennessee had a pair of defensive scores in that game. And then Texas A&M. It was 7 points allowed in the first half and 7 points allowed until late in the third quarter. I know A&M really pulled away late, and once Marcel Reed started getting a little bit more settled in, that offense got a little bit better. But State's defense just keeps finding ways to make plays. They have found ways to set up the offense, and frankly, it's the offense that is letting them down in moments and not providing the consistency that you need to see out of that unit. So for Mississippi State, this defense, Coleman Hutzler's unit has taken a huge step forward. Are they special, impressive at any one thing? No. They're not a great pass rush, right? They're not a dominant run defense. They're not even a dominant pass defense for as good as State's corners have played to this point. We've seen some receivers be able to get open downfield, be able to have some big plays. But they just find ways to step up. They find ways to get stops, whether it be forcing 3 and outs, whether it be holding in the red zone, whatever it is, they find ways to step up and make big plays in big moments. And they do a good job of forcing turnovers. Definitely have to give them that. This defense has been very impressive to this point of the year, and I've got to give them like an A and A minus. The only reason it's not a full-on A plus is, of course, they're just not a great defense, but they've played really well to this point, and I think you got to give them a ton of credit for that. Biggest positive for the offense, the emergence of State's corners. Kelly Jones has played really, really well this season. I know the last couple games have not been as shutdown dominant. You start facing better players, but he's still done a pretty good job holding his own in those games. Diego Brumfield, opposite of him, has played pretty well for State. State has got a pair of SEC cornerbacks that they can trot out there right now and feel pretty good. Like, those guys are not just going to get burnt all day, which was a huge question going into the season. So the fact that they have that's big for this team. Biggest negative so far, I would say, is pass rush. The fact that you've not been able to get a ton going on the season, 8 sacks. So they're only 2 away from matching their season total from a season ago. But, Will Whitson is still tied for the team lead with 2 sacks, and he's only played 2 games. You're averaging just 1 1/3 sack per game. Now, obviously, losing Whitson was a huge blow, and clearly you're missing him. But you were hoping someone else could step up with him gone. And that's kind of the one thing. If this team could get a little bit more of a consistent pass rush, more consistently get after quarterbacks. And look, quarterback hurries are a part of that as well. The Tennessee game, even when they were not finishing with sacks, I thought they did a good job getting pressure. Texas A&M, they really struggled to get pressure in that game. So it's been very up and down for this team. That's kind of the negative, is that you've not been able to find that pass rush. But if you can find that moving forward, that'll be huge. If I'm going to look at a question for this defense, I don't know. I don't know if I have a true – what is the thing I'm questioning for this team? I guess the question is, can you keep it up? And I know the pace is going to slip a little bit, but do you reach a breaking point of the year? Kind of the way that we've reached a breaking point in games, Texas A&M being the best example. Do you reach a point with the defense where we kind of look up and it's like, okay, like hindsight being 2020, that unit like was just sort of playing above their skis for a while and they're going to fall off. Can you keep this going the rest of the year? That's the big question I have for the defense. Special teams, I really didn't think this one through, and I'm not going to go through positives, disappointments, or whatever from a special team standpoint. I guess just a B. Kickoffs have not been perfect. You've had the one kickoff out of bounds, not really giving up a bunch of long returns for what it's worth. I don't think Haven't really gotten burned on either return game. I don't believe so. Yeah, you've done a pretty good job in kick coverage. Kyle Ferry, to this point, if I can pull up his stats, 7 for 8 on the year. So had the one miss, but he's been perfect on extra points. So it's been a pretty good year for him. The punting has been very up and down, but I think if it starts going to more of being, oh my goodness, why am I blanking on his name? Ethan Pulliam moving forward, I think you're going to be a lot better off. Feels like Nate Tice, they're kind of thinking as him being the guy to pin teams deep. I get it, because it does kind of look like Pulliam. His approach is very much just boom the ball as far as possible. Obviously, you reach a point of the field where you got to be a little bit more finesse, but frankly, Mississippi State in that point of the field also is typically going for it on more fourth downs. So, how big a deal is that? But I would say B grade for the special teams all around. They've not been an outstanding unit. I think there were a little bit higher expectations for the group. If there's one thing I want to see, can we get some kick return going? And I know, obviously, that – and punt return for that matter. And I know that hinges a little bit on getting those opportunities, but you want to see guys like Devon Booth, Xavier Gaden, Anthony Evans be able to break off some long returns. I think those are things to really watch for that group moving forward. Season as a whole, how do I grade team? B+. You're 4-2. The only reason you can't say A, and I know that still feels like maybe a little bit of a low grade considering they've outperformed expectations, and one of the losses was very close to a very good team. The fact that they haven't looked great to this point is what does dock them a little bit. And look, the last game probably hurts them a little bit more. But overall, man, 4 wins for a team that coming into the season you didn't know if they would have 4 wins to this point, that is a positive. Like, the only thing that's preventing this from being an A is the fact that they haven't looked great, or haven't looked like a complete team, I would say, over the course of an entire game point outside of the Alcorn State game. That's kind of the one thing. If they can find the ability to start playing more complete football games moving forward, one, they're going to win a few more games, but two, that'd bump the grade up more. But yeah, Mississippi State, solid B+ to this point of the season. Been really impressed with what you've seen so far, and have to be confident about the rest of the season.